wouldn't say I'm a Coach K fan, but I'm not like a certified card-carrying Coach K hater either. So in some ways, I'm glad that he's still alive. Like it would have felt weird, or I should say that Duke is still alive in the tournament. I'm also glad that he is still like living and breathing.
That's good. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into Monkey Knife Fight Sweet 16 preview show. I'm Dan Watkins. Joining me from Rotowire.com, Nick Whalen and John McKechnie. Boys, I guess we'll start off with the most basic water cooler question in America right now. How's the bracket doing, Nick?
It's not doing well. I'll tell you that much. I think I'm probably on course for my worst bracket of all time. I did not foresee St. Peter's pulling the upset on Kentucky. That was a big one for me. I know you have Kentucky winning it all, Dan. I have Kentucky going all the way to the championship game and losing to Arizona. So at least I still have that. Like if Arizona can win the whole thing, I'll probably pull off like a semi-respectable finish in the end. But man, John was saying he's in like the 87th percentile of the ESPN bracket challenge. I'm in like the 4th percentile of the My Girlfriend's Family bracket challenge.
That is tough.
Right. And then of course that leads to the, I thought you did this for a living type of thing, which I don't want to get into that. I've been through that with fantasy football in years past. It's not pleasant.
Yep. It's always a tough one. Luckily for you this year, Nick, you have no like holiday falling during the tournament, so you don't have to see everybody in one group setting. So I think
Easter's coming up, but yeah,
it is. But it'll be like 2 weeks past. I mean, people will be talking NBA playoffs by then, and that's we know that's your wheelhouse. So
exactly,
dodged a bullet there, John. How's the bracket? 87th percentile, very nice.
So we're off to a good start. I also have Arizona winning it all. I feel a little bit less good about that than I did initially. That Sunday night game was an absolute war against TCU. Didn't do great in the first round, but enough of my Sweet 16 is still alive to where I think that's kind of carrying my score to this point. I got 10 teams still kicking around. We'll see how it shapes out from here. But otherwise, my reaction. Talking last week, the question was posed, how do you feel about other SEC programs? I don't like them. And so a lot of schadenfreude going on this weekend. Sunday was great with Auburn going down and Tennessee also falling short, I think, on Saturday. Of course, Kentucky, but I don't really mind Kentucky one way or the other. They're just kind of an established great program, but seeing their existential crisis and them having to get the checkerboard off their logos in response to losing to the Peacocks, pretty funny stuff. That's always good to see.
Yeah, as Nick mentioned, I had Kentucky winning it all. So by Thursday night, my bracket was in flames. But, just for the total tease, though, now going forward is that I actually did really well in the other games in the first round. So I was like somewhere in the upper 20s, like 26, 27, 28 other picks correct. So I'm still doing great in the standings, but that's just going to crater from here on out because there's just not that many points left on the board. So what is the biggest takeaway for you guys from the first weekend of the tournament? Is it the Kentucky upset St. Peter's Peacocks moving on to the next round as the 15 seed? Is it Gonzaga's struggles, or is it the terrible officiating that we've seen highlighted with the Brady Manick call?
I think St. Peter's is the main storyline for sure. And we've seen, it feels like these runs are happening more often than they used to. Like for some reason, and maybe it's because this was like right at my peak of like formative college basketball fan years, but like George Mason, when that run happened, that felt like a singular, like we've never seen anything like this before. And it does feel like now, like every other year we get like a 14 or a 15, even UMBC as a 16, pulling off these major upsets. So, it maybe doesn't quite feel as groundbreaking as it did back in, I don't know, what was that, 2007, 2008, when George Mason made that run. But the more you hear about St. Peter's, it's like, not only is this a mid-major school, this is like the lowest of the low mid-majors. It's like we kind of get all these feature stories now that are coming out. Like this basically operates as like a glorified high school. And not only do they beat Kentucky, but they go on and get another win against Murray State in round 2. So I think that's definitely the primary story. Can this run continue as a 15 seed? That's what draws in, I think, the most casual fans who, like me, maybe your team got knocked out on Sunday and you need another team to kind of attach yourself to. I'll certainly be rooting for St. Peter's. But other than that, I think it's, you said Gonzaga struggled a little bit. Arizona struggled a little bit. Probably, very well could have lost that game to TCU based on how the officiating went in the final seconds. But I think both of those teams, really being pushed to the brink and both of them bouncing back To me, that's the big storyline among the non-mid-major, non-Cinderella type of stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Every year, the national champion, every year you can go back to early on in the tournament when they were tested, and it's probably a good thing for the long run. But John, what's your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, so sticking in that corner of the East region, like Nick was saying about St. Peter's, of course, but I think the most fun game that I took in over the weekend was San Francisco Murray State. I just thought that game was amazing, just incredible individual performances on both sides of the floor. Had a lot of fun watching that one. Saw a random Murray State sweatshirt in the wild on Saturday. I was like, okay, all right, good for y'all. I didn't know that you guys were out there, but good to see. Go Racers. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out for them, but hey, St. Peter's, a great story. Edert, obviously in the club, the Mustache Club. Timmy, also, so he shorted it down. So he's back in the good graces, and it's no wonder that they're alive this weekend. I think if he went in just full beard, things could have been an issue. I think otherwise, sticking within that same region, but the other side of it. North Carolina looks to me like a team that just the public totally slept on and looks like it's going to be a huge problem for everybody. I was just so impressed by their game against Baylor. Obviously, that they let the 25-point lead slip away shortly after the Woodsman got ejected and everything like that. But they held tough. They were actually live underdogs going into overtime. So that's how bad things had gotten for them quickly. But they've kept that UNC identity that they developed under Roy Williams, where they just crash the boards. They're so tough. What was his name? RJ Davis, just canning all those threes. Just really impressive stuff. So I think North Carolina might be the most dangerous team in the tournament right now. And Houston too. I would be very, very scared to play Houston right now.
It's crazy watching North Carolina games and seeing Roy Williams in the stands. It's just like a total, it just messes with your mind there. But a couple of takeaways from me here. Got to go with Drew Timme. Clearly listens to this program and shaved his full beard and just going back to the stash after John shamed him and for leaving the club last week. And then secondly, it's St. Peter's and The Athletic with what a headline. I mean, it's just the content gift that keeps on giving. It's Cinderella has a stash. Meet Doug Edert in St. Peter's, the new March Madness darlings. There it is right there. It's perfect. I mean, John, you guys even kind of look alike. He could be like a distant relative.
He could be. He clearly has a lot more athleticism. So, it would have to be a distant uncle that was actually good at sports or something. But, I think we have a lot of similar bravado and things of that nature. I saw that he has a NIL deal with the Buffalo Wild Wings. And I also noticed that in his living space, the thermostat looks like it's from the 1970s. So all the respect to Edert. That guy is living right now.
Yeah, St. Peter's just the third 15 seed to make the Sweet 16. Oral Roberts did it last year. And then going back to like 7 or 8 years ago, everybody's favorite 15 seed, Florida Gulf Coast. So we'll see how St. Peter's does against Purdue this week. But did you guys know that since 2013, a 5 seed or lower has reached the Final Four every single year? So each of the past 9 years. This year, we still have quite a few of those teams left in the Sweet 16. We got Houston, UNC, Miami, Iowa State, Michigan, and St. Peter's. So Nick, which one of those teams, if that trend is to continue, do you see making the Final Four?
Well, as much as I would love it to be St. Peter's, that seems pretty unlikely. I think they're going to run into some matchup issues against this Purdue team. On what is that game on Friday night? It's actually a pretty big break for Purdue, I think, which was a team that, as we talked about last week, there's a lot to like, but there are a lot of flaws with that team, and those flaws just really aren't going to be exploited, at least not in this round. Maybe they will be against North Carolina or UCLA in the Elite Eight, but pretty major break for Purdue. I think St. Peter's run probably comes to an end on Friday. John mentioned North Carolina, that team does not look like an 8 seed at all, a team that was dead in the water like 2.5 weeks ago. And I don't know if that win over Duke, to end the ACC season sparked something in them, but this is a team that certainly has the look of a top 4 seed right now. And there's a lot to like. I mean, they don't necessarily have any big time NBA prospects on that roster, but they've built like a perfect college roster, right? It's like you have this veteran rugged forward in Brady Manick, who doesn't match like anything about the North Carolina aesthetic at all. Like probably the biggest player school mismatch since Ricky Davis going to Iowa. You have Armando Bacot, who's like not really on the NBA radar, but is just a great college big man. RJ Davis, like John mentioned, like good player, but kind of came out of nowhere with his performance last weekend. To me, North Carolina is the team to keep an eye on for that question specifically. I like UCLA. I have UCLA in my Elite Eight, but they didn't look great. I didn't think in either of their two games. They're kind of lucky to escape.
Yeah, and they just lost one of their guards too, who might not be playing on Friday night or whatever. Friday night. Yeah, when they come up. So yeah, Brady Manick, great story. He was recruited with Trae Young to Oklahoma, part of that legendary Oklahoma class that lost to URI in the tournament. By the way, just going to throw that out there. But
as we all remember.
Yep, John, who is your sleeper team to get to the Final Four?
Yeah, so to me, it's UNC. But beyond that, I think the way that Houston matches up, and again, that this terrifies me as someone who has Arizona going the distance, but I think that Houston is not a great matchup for Arizona. Everything that Arizona does well offensively, Houston has a good penchant for slowing it down or stopping it, whether it's, limiting 3-pointers, clogging up the paint, whatever it may be. Houston really has that ability, whereas Arizona is so balanced. They're able to hit threes, but they're also able to dominate inside. So that's going to be a fascinating matchup. Kelvin Sampson, obviously a super experienced coach in this spot. And, they've made deep runs before there in Houston with him. So I think that they are the dangerous one, them and UNC. I don't really see, the 10-11 matchup, the Iowa State, Miami Hurricanes matchup. Don't really see either of those teams beating Kansas. Again, assuming that Kansas beats the Ocean State's current finest, the Providence Friars, of course. But that's where I'm leaning. I'm going with UNC and Houston as the 5 seeds or higher that have the best chances of being alive when we talk next week.
I love that the committee or whoever does the TV scheduling, they buried Miami versus Iowa State at like 10:30 Friday night, as that is the last game to tip off.
Deserved.
Yeah. So speaking of Iowa State, Nick, they ended your Badgers seasons. Any parting words for the 2021-2022 Wisconsin basketball team?
But they are who we thought they were.
I think the biggest game of the season, a very, very beatable opponent that was begging to lose that game on Sunday. Wisconsin turned in easily its worst game of the entire season against any opponent. A ton of turnovers. I thought Tyler Wall played probably the worst game of his college career. Johnny Davis certainly did not look like a lottery pick in that game. And it felt like when they lost a freshman game managing, defensive minded point guard in Chucky Hepburn, you could see the team just like almost felt like, all right, we have no chance now. And it's like, I like Chucky Hepburn. He's going to be a really good college point guard, but that should not have been the final nail in the coffin that it seemed like it was in that game. So it was just a comedy of errors by the Badgers down the stretch. I mean, Stephen Crowell, like the super weak, Under Armour shirt wearing big man of theirs, like that blatant, obvious goaltend with like 4 minutes left in the game when they absolutely needed a bucket. That felt like like one of like 5 daggers that the Badgers had late in that game. Just it was tough to watch. As you can tell, I'm still a little fired up about it.
Yeah, and when it comes to Providence, as Ed Cooley put it just so wonderfully after the game against Richmond on Saturday, Providence is in the damn building. And if they play the way they did against Richmond, when they hit their 3-pointers, they shot like 55% from 3. They hit 12 of them against the Richmond Spiders. They're going to give Kansas everything they got Friday night in that matchup. But at the same time, we've seen this the entire season, that Providence gets hot and then they cool off the next night. So that week layoff here, I'm a little worried that they're going to be too cold to start the game and Kansas is going to get up big and just take it to them. So I'm not expecting them to advance, but they could if they get hot. So, which is just the story of March Madness. And John, last week when we left, we didn't quite have a team narrowed down for you for who you're backing, but I know you have Arizona as your pick to win it all. So who's your team? Is it Arizona?
It's got to be the Cats. I have an uncle that went there, so I have at least a shred of connection to the school. I've been to not Tucson but Scottsdale, and I've enjoyed it. So I'm like a fan of parts of the state of Arizona. So I think I will roll with the Cats. But I am, finding myself really enamored with this UNC team. I like the UCLA team because of the run that they made a year ago. So coming out of the East, I would be down with either of those schools making a deeper run. I don't particularly care for Gonzaga or Duke, so I'm hoping that Texas Tech or Woo Pig is able to come out of the West. So I'm like starting to line up my teams from each region that I'm pulling for. The one that I feel the most neutral on is the Midwest, whether it's Kansas or Providence. Coming out of there, it doesn't really do a whole lot for me either way. But bottom line, Arizona, those are my boys right now. And then I'll just get a pendant that just says East on it for the rest of the bracket action.
Very good. Very good. Last thing I want to get to here before we talk about some of these player matchups and contests on MKF. Nick, draft season right around the corner. Who has stood out to you? Who's caught your eye? Anybody surprising that you see kind of rocketing up the charts?
I mean, not necessarily surprising. I think if anything, we saw some more like negative surprises. You know, a lot of guys like Keegan Murray, Johnny Davis getting knocked out on opening weekend. Those were guys who had pretty major opportunities, I thought, to improve their draft stock during this tournament. You could throw Ty Washington from Kentucky in that category as well. He's been banged up and he might even come back to school next year. But in this class, he had a chance to play himself really into solid lottery territory. I think Ben Mathurin at Arizona, I guess he has said he wants to be called Benedict. So excuse me, Benedict Mathurin at Arizona is a guy who in a lot of mocks going into the tournament, you would see him from like the 8 to 14 range. I mean, if Arizona continues this run and he plays like he did in the second half of that game against TCU, he's a guy that he's only a sophomore. He's kind of right on par for his age, for his class. So he's not somebody that you worry about being too old by current NBA draft standards. He's a guy I think that could end up usurping a player like Johnny Davis or, a more veteran player like Keegan Murray as, one of the first like non-freshmen off the board when you're getting beyond the Banchero, Holmgren tier of players. I think he's a guy that could play his way into like the 4th or 5th overall pick if Arizona continues this run to the Final Four. It's just really hard to find any weaknesses in his game. Like you watch him, and I feel like I'm watching like 2015 Victor Oladipo.
There you go. There's a comparison from Indiana back in the day. Whenever I hear someone, especially getting close to the draft, that they want to change their name, right, and go by their full formal name, all I can think of is Mitch Trubisky before the draft a few years ago going, no. It's Mitchell Trubisky. And, we all know how that's played out. Still, technically, I guess, a starting quarterback in the NFL right now for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But let's get into these contests and these matchups. John, let's start with our guy, Drew Timme. Gonzaga taking on Arkansas here in the Sweet 16. Timme dropped 32 and 25 in the first 2 rounds. For the Sweet 16, his more or less number is just 19.5. How do you feel about Timme?
Yeah, I mean, my whole perspective on Timme has obviously changed over the course of the last week based solely on his mustache choices, but just such a dominant second half from him the other night when Gonzaga absolutely needed it. Not a whole lot else was going right, and he just kind of took the game over from there against Memphis. Super, super impressive. If you look at Arkansas and what they're good at, they definitely struggle a little bit as far as defending the paint is concerned, and that's obviously where Timme makes his money. So I would be a little bit concerned about that, but maybe they try to clog the paint up and make Gonzaga beat them with some threes, with some shooting. Timme, he can do it a little bit, but that's not really the bread and butter of his game. So I think that Gonzaga just aims to go back to the well with Timme. I think he's going to be the engine of this offense once again, and I think that we see more than 19.5 from him. I think we see him into the 20s.
Nick?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, this line's a little low. I think maybe people are looking at the Arkansas New Mexico State game from the round of 32, where there were 101 combined points in this game. Not a math guy. 53 to 48. So maybe they're saying this is going to be a game where Arkansas is able to muck it up and slow things down and get Gonzaga out of what they want to do, but frankly, I think Gonzaga's talent advantage is going to push through here. And as we kind of hinted at the top of the show, it feels like both Gonzaga and Arizona had their crazy test, that most teams seem to go through either in round 1 or round 2. And now that they both made it through that, Gonzaga surviving that game against Memphis, getting pushed to the absolute brink. It feels like they've pushed past that and now they can get back to being the more dominant team that we think they can be. So I really like Gonzaga to roll in this game. And if that's going to be the case, Timmy's going to be the main reason why.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you guys across the board here. Timmy, I think, is going to get well into the 20s in this game, so I wouldn't even sweat this one. Moving on, Chet Holmgren, 15.5 more or less for him. Nick, how do you feel about Holmgren?
I've been very impressed by Chet Holmgren through these first two games, especially in round one. I mean, obviously they had an advantageous matchup against a 16, but to approach a triple double with blocks, I think he's pretty much shown everybody who potentially doubts what he can do at the NBA level that, despite the slight frame, he's going to be really, really good because his instincts are fantastic, especially on the defensive end. Scoring wise, it could be a little bit up and down. You always worry about him potentially getting in foul trouble. That's one of the main things. Like, as someone who watches a ton of NBA, it's like players just don't really get in foul trouble that much in the NBA. There are a few big men who you worry about, but like for the most part, like 90% of players are never in foul trouble. Partially because of how the game's officiated, partially because you have an extra foul, but in college, it's such a big part of the game. So if he's able to, avoid foul trouble, I like the over pretty comfortably here. If he ends up with 2 fouls in the first 8 minutes and has to sit, the bulk of the first half, then this could get a little tight. But I think I would go more on this number, gun to my head.
John?
Yeah, this one's really tricky because he did struggle a bit against Memphis, and it was surprising. And like Nick said, foul trouble really played a huge part in that. Fouling out late in that game, kind of hanging on with 4 fouls there for a while. Didn't hit any of his threes. I don't expect that to be the case this time around. I think that he can be a little bit more effective as a shooter in this matchup, coming off of the shaky performance against Memphis. Again, this one is really tricky. Arkansas does have an ability to slow an offense. Can they slow the best offense in the country? I'm not so sure on that one. I'm going to take the less for Holmgren. It's a little bit of recency bias and infused for the record. Obviously, he's an incredible talent. Just it's still disorienting for me to watch a guy that tall and that skinny be that good. But here we are. But I will take the less for Holmgren in this setup.
Yeah, I'm going to go more just because I think we're going to see Gonzaga at full power here in this game. I think we've been waiting to see it so far in the tournament. This just seems like the perfect opportunity for them to be firing away on all cylinders. And I think Holmgren can easily get to 16 points against Arkansas. And when it comes to Arkansas, JD Monty, their guard, he is their driving force, the heart and soul of the Razorbacks. He scored 17 and 18 points in each of the first 2 tournament games. He's averaging about 18.5 this season. And it just so happens his more or less here on MKF is 18.5. John, how do you feel about Monty?
I'm going to go with less. I think that Arkansas is going to struggle to find much in the way of offensive solutions in this game. I know that Note is a huge driving force for them, but I'm going to go with less. I think that they're going to go ahead and do everything that they can to limit his impact, make the rest of that Razorback depth show up and try to keep up with Gonzaga. So I think he's the first guy that they try to take off the board. And with that, I worry about him struggling. I'm going to go with less.
Nick?
I'm going to go the other way and go more. I think we're all in agreement that, Gonzaga had their tests and they're probably going to find a way to roll in this game. But I mean, Note is the Arkansas offense at this point. And, you look at, you didn't really shoot the ball well in either of their first 2 games, 5 of 16, 5 of 18 from the field. Did get to the free throw line a combined 16 times, though, in those 2 games. He's 2 of 10 from 3. So, to me, there's some argument that maybe he snaps out of this and, Gonzaga wins the game by 15 points, but Note, does most of the heavy lifting for Arkansas. So that's kind of the script that I see this playing out is, he's going to go down firing. Arkansas is probably going to struggle as a team offensively, but I could see this being a game where Note finishes like, 7 of 26 from the field for 22 points or something like that.
Yeah, I'm going to go more, and I think he's going to get it in like garbage time. I just
right
down the end there. And if this line comes down at all, I would hammer it too. By the way, if this drops to like 16, right around there, I would definitely hammer it. Moving on here, Michigan-Villanova. Michigan, I mean, it's just kind of storybook stuff, right? This season with the Juwan Howard incident. And then here they go. He comes back. They're making their run. They look like Michigan from, 5 years ago where they were making Final Four runs. And now they get their rematch here against Villanova, who beat them in the national championship game a few years ago. And Michigan, their entire world revolves around Hunter Dickinson, their center, the 7'1" sophomore is an absolute monster. 27 points against Tennessee in the second round, 11 boards to go with that. He dropped 21 in the first round as well. His more or less is 18.5. I love the more here because I don't think Villanova has the big man to stop to keep him, fully contained. Nick, how do you feel?
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I think what he showed against Tennessee, that told me a lot. 27 and 11 in that game, 8 of 10 at the line, good free throw shooter by big man standards, even stepped out and hit 3 3-pointers in that game. I mean, he is really throwing this team on his back. And like you said, it is storybook in some ways. I mean, it's just a weird story. I don't know who would write this story of coach who belongs in prison ends up winning 2 games to begin the NCAA tournament. But we should have seen this coming, right? Like for some reason, once Michigan won its first round game, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even pick them to get out of round 1. And for some reason, it just feels like this is how it was always going to go.
Yeah, it kind of was that feeling of, oh, here we go. This is, and then there was the hug. Nick, how do you feel about the hug there with Howard and the player from Tennessee? I mean, immediately all of Twitter is exploding. You better show this as much as you were showing the punch and all that kind of stuff. How do you feel about that?
It's a try hard move, right? Like he's been watching Coach K film. I don't know. Like I don't like when Coach K does stuff like that. Like as an opposing player, and I know there was some connection there, like he had recruited him or something like that. It wasn't like he was just some random guy. But I don't like if I'm upset after like maybe my last college game of my career, I don't want the opposing coach coming over to me while I'm like sobbing on the court. That's my own coach's job. That's my parents' or teammates' job. That felt like a calculated get back in the good graces of the public move by Juwan Howard.
PR move. John, how do you feel about Dickinson and the Wolverines?
Yeah, and first of all, I welcome any skepticism on Juwan Howard. Not a huge fan of his as a coach, dating back to when he tried to fight Mark Turgeon about a year ago in the Big Ten tournament. So that kind of turned me off to him. That and the fact that he poaches all the good players from the DC area, including our guy Hunter Dickinson, DeMatha graduate. But yeah, I really worry about Villanova's size here being a problem, because Dickinson, like we've established, he's 7'1". You got Jermaine Samuels and Eric Dixon on the other side, both 6'8" or less. Michigan just kind of has the runway here to just pound the ball with Dickinson, get in the paint and just let him go to work, let him get him to the free throw line. He obviously can shoot threes like we talked about earlier. This just sets up really, really nicely. That I think that Villanova still has a very good chance to win this game, but Dickinson is going to make it pretty uncomfortable throughout it. I think that he's going to be a major factor, and I don't know who else on Michigan really is going to be able to have anywhere close to the same kind of success. So give me the more on Dickinson.
All right, very good. We know the story with Villanova this year is they go how far their guards take them. I'm going to give you guys both their 2 starting guards here. Justin Moore, his number is 14.5, and Colin Gillespie, who is like in his 17th year at Villanova. He's just been there forever. His more or less number is 15.5. Nick, how do you feel about the guards for Villanova?
Yeah, I mean, Moore's been a little bit more inconsistent of late. He's been, under 10 points in 2 of his last 4 games. I would probably go less on that number for him. It feels like Gillespie is the guy who really, really drives the ship. When he's going and when he's hitting threes, they're a really tough team to beat. So I'd go more on Gillespie, less on Moore, ironically enough. But, Gillespie, you look at just that last game against Ohio State, it wasn't even pretty for him. And he still finished with 20 points, played 38 minutes. I mean, he's out there as much as possible, went 5 of 14 from the field, 2 of 9 from 3. But much like we talked about with Note, he's a guy who gets to the line, 8 of 8 at the free throw line. So when you're looking at points props specifically, guys who could just give you a really nice floor at the free throw line, even when they have an off shooting night, that's huge. So that's part of the reason I'm going more there.
John?
Yeah. So again, Villanova, like we said, is really, really guard heavy. It comes down to these 2 guys. Michigan doesn't have the best perimeter defense, so I expect Villanova to really test that out with their 3-point shooting. Moore is just he's getting the shot volume that usually kind of steers me towards believing in a Moore type of situation here, but he just hasn't been connecting on those. Like I expect him to shoot 6 to 8 3-point attempts, but I just don't feel like he has the feel right now. So I'm going to take a less on him. And I think Gillespie is just too much of like the engine of that offense in and of itself. So I will take the more for Gillespie. So I'm on the same page as you guys.
I love the more for Gillespie, especially that they're in a primetime spot here in this game. He just always seems to show up. And he's one of these guys that once he hits 1 3-pointer, the floodgates are open. He's going to hit 2 or 3 more right after that. And you're going to be looking at pretty close to the line here, I think, by the end of the first half. So let's move on. We'll do the Duke game here. Is this it for Coach K? Surprisingly, Texas Tech is favored in this game by 1 point, which I found is a little bit of a surprise. We know that they love to slow the game down big time. And that's why Paolo Banchero's number here on MKF is only 15.5. John, he had 17 and 19 in the first 2 games. He's averaging 17 this season. Can he get to his average in this game?
Yeah, I'm skeptical. I'm not the biggest Duke believer, and I think Texas Tech is kind of a nightmare matchup for them. They have the best adjusted defense, according to Ken Palm. They're really tough inside the perimeter as far as their defense goes. So I think that is going to kind of funnel things out to Duke's other playmakers. I'm not going to cry for them. They have plenty of other help that will be able to have success here in this matchup. But I think that Banchero struggles a little bit in this one. I think Texas Tech just is nails defensively, especially on the interior. I think that's where we see the under or the less come in on Banchero.
Nick?
Yeah, I mean, it says a lot that Duke is not favored in this game, especially given the circumstances with Coach K, given how public of a team they are this time of year. That would scare me a little bit if I was a Duke sympathizer, certainly. I don't think you'd feel great going into this game either way, but the fact that the odds makers are putting this one in favor of Texas Tech really says a lot about how dependable and how much this team really has not missed a beat transitioning from Mark Adams away from Chris Beard. So I don't really have a take on how I want the Coach K situation to end. I wouldn't say I'm a Coach K fan, but I'm not like a certified card carrying Coach K hater either. So in some ways, I'm glad that he's still alive. It would have felt weird, or I should say that Duke is still alive in the tournament. I'm also glad that he is still living and breathing.
That's good.
But yeah. It would have felt weird for him to go out in round 2, and it would have been a little poetic if Tom Izzo was the guy to knock him out. But I think the tournament is better for Duke at least making it to the second weekend. I'm not saying Duke has to go, run the table and win the whole thing and send Coach K out with his players carrying him off the court on their shoulders, but it's good that they're still alive. And this matchup is going to test them, I think, certainly more than either of those first 2 round matchups did. With Banchero, I mean, he's looked pretty good. I think these first 2 games, a lot of people were down on Banchero. I mean, his draft stock is just kind of slowly bled out over these last couple of months, and he's still going to be a top 5 pick, but he's no longer the no doubter number 1 guy that it looked like he was going to be in November and December. But I'm going to side with the Texas Tech defense. The odds makers know what they're doing. I think this is going to be a really, really ugly game. I think Duke can do a better job than Notre Dame, which shot 32.7% from the field in that round of 32 game, but they're going to muck it up. And like John alluded to, they have other options. Banchero doesn't need to go for 25 in this game. And that's not really the player he's been. He's been happy to defer to guys like AJ Griffin, Mark Williams, Wendell Moore. Although we're going to need to see what AJ Griffin's status is heading into this game.
And then on the other side, you got Bryson Williams. He was the leading scorer for the Red Raiders, 14 a game during the season. That just tells you how slow they play and what kind of game they're going to want to make this one. But he did have 20 and 14 in the first 2 rounds. His more or less against Duke, 14.5. Nick, what do you expect out of Williams?
I'm going to go more. I mean, this could be a game, as you're alluding to, where the leading scorer on each team has 14 or 15 points. So that's a little bit of a hazard, but you look at his last 12 games, winding down the Big 12 season, factoring in some Big 12 tournament games, he's averaging 15.2 points in only 26.1 minutes. That's the thing. He's been in foul trouble in a couple of these games, only played a combined 40 minutes in their first 2 games of this tournament. So, if he plays north of 25 minutes, I would feel really, really good about this. Kind of the same conversation we had about Chet Holmgren. If he's out there long enough, he's going to score.
John?
I'm going to take the more. I was not previously aware of how long this Bryson Williams had been in college for. He started his college career in the 2016-17 season at Fresno State before spending some time at UTEP before finally reaching Lubbock. But whether that really plays a factor, besides the point. But I think that just because of the fact that Duke is going to likely dictate its tempo and maybe get Texas Tech out of its, slow playing style a little bit. They're going to need to be able to, make the most of their possessions and get it going that way. Just because Williams really is that guy for Texas Tech, I will go with the more. And it's a relatively low number. Like if this was 16.5, 17, something like that, then I'd feel a little bit less confident about it. But I think where it's at right now, I'm going to go with the more for Williams.
Guys, next week when we do the MKF Final Four show, who are the 4 teams we're going to be talking about? I'm giving you a second chance to redo your Final Four here. I'll start. I'll give you guys 30 seconds to think about it. But I'm going to go Duke, UNC, Kansas, and Arizona in the Final Four. All blue bloods, excuse me. But I think that's just setting up for Coach K to get a chance to beat North Carolina, avenge his last game at Cameron Indoor, and do it on the Final Four on a grand stage there in New Orleans. But yeah, so give me those 4 teams. Nick, who do you got?
I think Kansas is going to make it out of the Midwest. I mean, what a path that KU, assuming they could get by Providence on Friday night, and what a path that would be to get Texas Southern, Creighton, Providence, and then the winner of Iowa State and Miami in the Elite Eight. So I think things are breaking really well for Kansas to get there. I mean, honestly, the East region is the toughest for me. I still like Arizona a lot coming out of the South. I'm going to go with Gonzaga in the West. I'm very big on this narrative that they got their scare out of the way against Memphis. And I don't know that Duke even makes it past Texas Tech, but man, the East region is so hard to figure out. I think if you could guarantee me that Jaime Jaquez is 100% for that UNC game, I would like UCLA to come out of that region, but I don't know if that's going to be the case. I think I'm going to have to go with Purdue just because to me, they are almost a lock to win at least their Sweet 16 game. Whereas UCLA, UNC to me, still somewhat of a toss-up, even if Jaquez is banged up. So I think you're kind of taking the more known commodity, assuming Purdue could get past St. Peter's. Then you're putting them in maybe a true 50-50 against UCLA or UNC. And chances are they'll probably be favored in that game too.
John?
I will go if you're looking at the right side of your bracket, I will have Kansas and Arizona. And then on the other side, I'm going to have UNC coming out of the East. I think they can do it. Nick obviously laid out a pretty good explainer as to how Purdue can get there. That's certainly within the realm of possibility you would figure their game coming up on Friday is going to be a little bit more or a little less taxing than whatever the winner of UNC UCLA is going to be coming out of. And then the quick turnaround off of that is tricky, but I really like the way that UNC is playing right now. And then Dan, I'll tell you over to Narrative Street. Let's get Duke and UNC on the left side for the Final Four as well. So Duke will come out on top against Texas Tech, and then they will beat Gonzaga in the Elite Eight, leading to a Coach K versus UNC there in the Final Four down in NOLA.
Very good. All right, guys. We'll talk to everybody next week. Thanks for watching. Good luck on your contests. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button too on our YouTube page and enjoy some more college basketball.